Hi, welcome to Cash Up, a weekly show where we converse with amazing folks in information security and digital forensics incident response. And today I'm so excited to be joined by the one and only Alyssa Miller. Alyssa is a world-renowned hacker, security researcher, podcaster, and advocate. She's currently the Business and Information Security Officer at S&P Global Ratings, a Technology Advisor Board member at Epiphany Solutions Group, ESG, as well as a member of the Board of Advisors at Blue Team Con. Prior to her current role, she's worked in a variety of security positions, including as the Application Security Advocate at Sneak, Head of Information Security Solutions at CDW, a Manager of Application Security Cybersecurity Practice at EY, a Head of Program Services at Aspect Security, Practice Manager for the Software Security Group at Optivink, Delivery Manager for Ethical Hacking COE at BIT, IT Security Manager at FIS, and more. Alyssa holds a Master's in Information Systems Management and a Bachelor's in Information Technology. She regularly shares her knowledge via her blog and the podcast she co-hosts, The Uncommon Journey. Alyssa is a prolific speaker, regularly sharing on a variety of topics from technical to strategic at industry events including Circle CityCon, GrimCon, DEF CON, RSA, multiple B-Sides events, and more than could ever be named here. In 2020 alone, she spoke at more than 30 events. Alyssa finds ways to give back both as a chapter leader for Women in Security WOSEC and as a member of Women in Cybersecurity WICS. She's a total phenom and inspiration to others in information security. I'm regularly inspired by her Twitter feed and presentations. Not only does she share her technical knowledge, but she uses her platform to address issues in our industry and finds ways to regularly uplift others. And it is an absolute honor to have her as a guest today. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, I'm honored to be here. Wow, you got me blushing and everything over here. My goodness.
Well, you do. You know, if there's somebody who I know in this industry who really takes serious the platform that she has and make sure that she's consistently using it, not only in your Twitter platform, but in your presentations. I've seen you give presentations where you have people who are new to the field and you are highlighting them and encouraging them and having them share what they're learning. And I just am constantly inspired by it. And just the way you take on that responsibility is amazing.
I guess I don't even look at it as a responsibility. It's just, this is the community I've spent the last 15 years of my life in. And as I've told people just recently, I'm pretty protective and defensive of our community. I think we do a lot of great things. And it's just anything that I can do to make that community better or to protect it from people who would seek to tear it down or weaken it in some way. That's just something I want to do because these are my people. This is where I belong. And for a community that's given me so much, I want to make sure that it continues and can give other people just as much as it's given me.
And that's what's so amazing about it, because you do it for the right reasons and just because it's the truth of who you are. And I love that. So speaking of who you are, one heck of a career you've had. How did you get started?
Do you want the really long answer, the long answer, or the quick answer?
Let's get in depth. Let's go all the way back.
All right, so let's go all the way back. I mean, I've been into tech since I was a little kid. I tell people I'm a lifelong hacker because, since I can think back to when I was 4 years old, two things really. One, I was always the kid who took my toys apart to figure out how they worked or to try to get them to do other things, right? I mean, very early on.
That's the definition of a hacker, right? Using
for sure, right? Exactly. So that's why I tell people, like, I am truly lifelong hacker. I've been doing this since I was a little kid. And the other thing I remember from when I was 4 was that I remember my dad, who was an accountant, bringing home his computer from work over the holidays because they were switching systems and he had to do a bunch of work to get set up on the new system before they opened the books for January 1.
Yeah.
So, the company he was working for, they were an HVAC company. So, the last 2 weeks of the year, nobody's in the office, right? So he wasn't going to go into the office by himself. So he he was showing me what work from home was back in, in the early 80s. And, so when he wasn't working on it, he had games on it that he let me play. And so that kind of sparked my interest. And then, we had computers at school. I was fortunate that way. But when I turned 12, I got a job, saved up enough money, I bought my first computer. And that's where my true first computer hacks happened. Some people out there who are as long in the tooth as me might remember a service called Prodigy.
Yes, I definitely remember Prodigy. We're equally long in the tooth, by the way.
So they had like games and things, but you had to have like a premium subscription to get to them. So I might have found ways to access them without that subscription. Maybe.
Allegedly.
I think I'm safe on the, as far as like the statute of limitations and whatnot. I think.
And you were a minor.
Yes, I was a minor, and I'm not even sure. Actually, I'd have to think about the year. What Computer Fraud and Abuse Act? Yeah, it probably existed by then. So,
CFA was 1986.
Yeah, so it would have been a few years in force. So, but in any event, long story short. So, but I still, tech wasn't like the career I had planned to get into. I tell people all the time, I went to school for pre-med.
Oh, wow.
I had every intention of being a doctor. And yeah, 3 semesters of college level chemistry. Peace out, y'all. I'm not doing this. So I had to scramble to find a different major. And so I started looking through the course catalog, and they had a computer science major. This is at Marquette University in Milwaukee. And so I switched. I'm like, well, that'll be easy. It's programming. I know how to program. I've been programming for a long time at that point in BASIC, and had started playing around a little bit with C++. And so, yeah, I transitioned into that. And it was while I was still in school, actually, that I got my first full-time job as a software developer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I started working for this financial services company in Wisconsin called, at the time, it was M&I Data Services. They later became Metavante Corporation, who then was later purchased by the company you mentioned before, FIS. And so I was a software developer for them for 9 years before I transitioned into a security role with them as a pen tester. Then career went from there, right? I mean, so now I spent another 6 years there. By the end of it, at 30 years old, I was running their vulnerability management program across all of FIS. Yeah, and then I got into consulting because after 15 years in financial services, I figured it was time to see what the rest of the world was doing. So that's where I started working for BT, then Fishnet, which became Optiv, then Aspect, which became EY, and on and on and on, right? And so that's just kind of how my career's progressed. And happily, I find myself now at S&P Global as a BISO, which is, an exciting new role for me that I just started at the beginning of the year.
That's incredible. And if people want to know more about what it is to be a BISO, you put out a fantastic article on your blog that really walks through what a BISO is and the importance of there being this balance between business needs and information security needs. And I actually think it's critical and not something people think of, because a lot of times organizations go, information security isn't revenue generating. And I think as a BISO, you're specifically looking at the business side of that. And I think that's maybe more organizations need to consider that.
I fully support that. So I've given a few talks on kind of this topic, and I certainly pontificate about it on Twitter a lot too, just the lack of business awareness that security people have, right? I mean, I can think back on how many board meetings I was in as a consultant where I watched, the CISO, who was the project sponsor, trying to talk to his board and listening to the way that these CISOs would, just pouring out technical details and threats and attack vectors and things. And you look, and everybody on the board or everybody in the executive committee has their heads down because they're looking at their cell phones because they're bored to death with whatever that person's talking about. And so, yeah, if you're going to go before your executive committee, you're going to go before your board of directors, you're going to go before a regulatory board. You have to be able to translate what your security stuff has to do with the business, because they don't give two shits, pardon my French, about what the threats are, what the attack vectors are. They care about what is the business risk that I face from this. Is it going to cost me money? Is it going to cost me customers? Is it going to mean I've got to hire 50 new people? What is it? That's what they want to understand. How does it impact our bottom line? How does it impact our business strategy? How does it keep us from doing the things that make us competitive or give us advantages in our market space? And if you can't communicate that as a security person, you fail.
100%, right? Being able to articulate, it's not just about doing the technical work. It's being able to articulate it to stakeholders, regardless of where you are in this field. It's what's going to make the difference in your ability to move up in your career. It's not all about the ones and zeros, right? And that's important.
And it's interesting because we've seen that shift with CISO roles, right? Like originally CISOs were always really, really technical. Then it swung the other way, and they started hiring people who had no technical security experience at all, and were putting them in those roles. And they found out that didn't work so well either. So now we're starting to swing back. We've got some who are really technical, some who are really, businessy, and we're starting to find that middle ground with a lot of CISOs now. There's a lot of CISOs I talk to at different events who you can tell they get it, right? Like they want to know more. I can think of a few that I interact with on Twitter who are great, who just really understand both aspects of it. I can think of one accidental CISO. If you ever interacted with his account, he's amazing. Mitch Parker from Indiana University is another one who I'll give a quick shout out to, because just phenomenal people who I get to interact with, and who really I can tell see things the same way I do. Like there's got to be that balance. As a CISO, Absolutely. You got to know the technical stuff, but you also got to understand how to function as a business executive. And
in a lot of ways, you're that translator for the executives, right? You need to be able to be in both sides, and that's imperative.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Something that you openly state, and something that you show anybody who follows you, is that you also truly are an advocate. How do you tie your advocacy to your work?
Boy, that's it's a hard question to answer, I guess. It's ultimately it's for my own best interests and the best interests of whoever company I'm representing, right? I mean, again, the stronger we get as a community, the better it is for all of us that are in this community. And that strength comes from so many different places. It comes from, and this is the one that people hear me, and forgive me, you're going to hear the D word. And yes, get over it. Diversity.
Yes.
Is so crucial when you think about it. And here's where I'm going to justify that word. So if you've heard enough talk of diversity, you're sick of hearing about diversity, well, let me explain to you why it's important. And it has nothing to do with people's feelings, although it's nice for that too. The thing is, in InfoSec, we are all about solving problems. That is what we do. That is the core of what we do. And it is a proven fact that diversity of perspectives, ideas, backgrounds, everything that creates that diversity is what makes you stronger as a problem-solving unit. So we get better in security the more diverse we get. That's why having an industry that's representative, most 75% white dudes, is a problem. People of color, women, LGBT who are underrepresented within this industry. It's so frustrating because we limit our own effectiveness as an industry by not fixing that situation.
I agree wholeheartedly. And it's not even just about the diversity to solve the problems and how it feels good. It's that we cannot represent our user base if we do not understand our user bases. And without that diversity in backgrounds, how are we supposed to secure our applications, understand the incidents that occur, if we cannot have that diversity in background? And I'd also say that diversity is a large pusher of why we should be open to career switchers. Career switchers bring so much diversity of thought from their previous roles and their previous interactions with technology that we who may have been career professionals working in information security or even development or technology our entire careers cannot grasp and cannot understand until they bring that diversity to it there. So there's just diversity can mean so many different things.
Yeah, and that's just it. And here's the other thing I'm going to throw out there because it's one of my biggest pet peeves. When I'll talk about this, right? And I'm not some DEI champion. Don't get me wrong. Like, it is incredibly important, and I advocate for diversity all the time, and equity and inclusion are the things that create diversity. But that's not my day job. That's not what I do. That's not how I primarily spend my time. In fact, it's only a very small subset of anything that I ever do, but it's so critically important. But the thing that frustrates me is when you mention the word diversity, you start talking about trying to fix diversity in terms of demographics, right? So whether it's race, neurodiversity, all of, sexual orientation, gender, all the things, you'll get those people come up and say, well, I'm worried about diversity of thought. Okay, you're right. That's what we're trying to achieve.
That's part of the.
But see, it's a dog whistle because the people who say that in that way, as a counter to you talking about diversity of all these demographic groups, are basically saying, well, I can get diversity of thought by hiring all white dudes. No, you can't. It doesn't work that way because you will be missing the perspectives of people who have lived a different life that a white dude has never lived, period. End of story. No two ways about it. A cis hetero white dude cannot tell you the experience of being a woman. And you want proof of it, there's proof out there in the world today. Look at TSA. A number of years ago, they were creating new body scanners. We all have our body scanners through TSA, right? And what happens? The new scanners were unfairly singling out Black women. Why? Because there are certain hairstyles that are very predominant amongst Black women that aren't predominant anywhere else, and because they hadn't been included in the test set, those were things that were setting off the scanners. Another one that just came up on Twitter the other day, I don't know if you saw this, JetBlue with their proud new seat back displays. The first thing it does when you sit down, it proudly boasts in big bold letters, "Hi, are you so-and-so?" using the name from your ticket and showing your real name.
Yeah, well, I'm highly uncomfortable with that.
Well, right. So maybe men don't see such a big deal in that. Some maybe do, or some understand it. But women, any woman who's had that creepy dude next to them who won't stop talking to them and won't leave them be, understands the last thing you want is that man to understand or to know your first name.
Absolutely.
But completely missed. And these are the kinds of things where you have to have that diversity of thought to catch those problems, to see those issues in design and to problem solve for it. So you can say, yes, we need diversity of thought, but you cannot divorce diversity of thought from diversity of those demographic measures that we use all over the place.
100%. A great example of this is there's a brand new Netflix documentary, Uncoded Bias. Mm-hmm. If anyone hasn't seen it, you should. It's a lot about the diversity in AI training models and what happens when we don't have a diverse set of people building that. In the digital forensics realm, we always talk about this concept of you don't know what you don't know, and that we have to make sure that we're doing that as we dig in response to an incident. And I think it goes exactly to that. When you're talking about diversity of thought without bringing in diverse voices, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's the root of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Such a good point. So you've got a long career in InfoSec. Mm-hmm. What truly is the biggest lesson you've learned in all of your career? Or at least one. We've all learned so many lessons.
I've learned a lot.
Not the biggest. I learn every day, so.
From a really truly career perspective, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is be honest about what's important to you and don't be afraid to go for it. And that can take a lot of different shapes. I know that's really nebulous and kind of duh, Alyssa, of course. But here's an example of what I mean. I have always had a hard time negotiating over titles, okay, right? So I was always the one who told my managers, like, oh, I don't care what my title is. I just care about the work I do and that I get paid decently. Yeah, that's not true. Because as much as it shouldn't matter, titles freaking matter. Excuse me. I just got off a call actually with my manager in my current role, and we were talking about exactly this. The fact that you don't want to admit that titles matter, but they do. And so if you're looking to break a certain level, you want to get to a director role, you want to get that VP title, you want a C-level title, you have to fight for it. And you shouldn't be ashamed at any point to push for it. You shouldn't feel uncomfortable asking your manager, what do I need to do in my position, in my career to achieve this level that I'm shooting for? And if you have a manager or a leader who makes you feel uncomfortable with that and doesn't make you feel safe asking those things, you have a terrible leader, and you should probably be thinking about where else you might want to go.
If your leader isn't an advocate and they're just managing, that's not what you need to grow. So if you want to grow, you need somebody who's going to be an advocate for you. 100.
And their job as a leader is to coach you through things like that. You can get mentors and stuff too. You should definitely, having a mentor who can help you with that is great. But step one should be whoever your leader is in your organization that you report to.
Well, and that's the difference, right? Because you may be working for a manager and not a leader. Some managers are leaders, but some not. And that's a really, really good point.
I know someone who wrote a LinkedIn article kind of like that.
Oh, yeah? Really? Oh. You do you? Do you?
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
If you do, seriously, I actually, one of my LinkedIn articles is leaders inspire bosses demand. Or I think I might have that backward. It might be bosses demand, leaders inspire, whatever it is. But yeah, the difference between what is a boss and what is a leader.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's learning to manage is very different than learning to lead. And I think the skill set is very, very different. And when you're a leader, it's all about bringing up everyone. Yep. When you're a manager, it's about taking credit for the people below you. And that's not good, right? Like advocating.
We've had those leaders, haven't we?
I think we all have, right? Like in a career, everyone is destined to have those. And sometimes you can learn very valuable lessons from the least wonderful situations you've been in. So that's good. Yeah. So where do you find inspiration?
Oh, all over the place, honestly. So I find inspiration, I think like a lot of people, just in those names in the community who I've looked up to for years, and or I shouldn't say looked up to, but whose work I've appreciated and really, tried to mimic or just, really been impressed with. And a lot of them are those big names that we see all over the place and whatnot. But at the same time, I get a lot of inspiration from the people who are just entering the industry.
Yes.
One person in particular who stands out to me, just as I'm thinking about it right now, she goes by Inverted Geek on Twitter. And she's, I met her. She came to one of my talks at B-Sides Chicago in 2019. And, was brand new to the industry. She was just starting to get a feel for it. She's, still going to school now. In fact, I think she's wrapping up. But she landed her first true cybersecurity gig this year. And I'm like, watching the excitement and the passion that these people have as they're getting into this industry, the things they want to do. That to me is just as inspiring as watching, someone who's releasing an ODE that they found in ARM architectures, or, they're breaking privacy controls in Facebook or whatever. I mean, that stuff's really super cool too. And that inspires me. But yeah, it's just, it's seeing the level of excitement, seeing how people think about things in ways that I never would have even imagined.
Right.
That's what's inspirational to me. I love that. And I love, more than anything else, seeing people when they set a goal for something they want to do and they hit it. And that's why Inverted Geek, or IG as we refer to her, that's why she came to mind, because I got to watch that from some of the very earliest stages with her when she was at that B-Sides conference to now where she's landed that first job and she's crushing it. Super intelligent, and she's just amazing. So yeah, people like that. And I mean, and I'm sorry to single her out, I mean, because I can think of hundreds of people that I interact with through social media or in other places who fit that same bill, who are just their passion, their drive, their desire, their curiosity, all of that gives me inspiration to keep going.
Alyssa, I could not agree more. Something we purposely do here on Cash Up, and people will know this, is that we mix in both people who everyone should know, like you, who are complete behemoths and phenoms in the field, with those people who are brand new to the field. Last week, we had on Maddie Brumbelow. She is finishing up her senior year at Champlain, but she has a nonprofit that's bringing tech to children all over the world who don't have access to computers. She is building CTFs. She's already landed her first role. And those things are so inspiring. I look at people like Elon Wright, goes by D for Diva on Twitter. When she was 9 months into the field, she's been a guest here. When she was a guest last February when she was very new to the field. And the reason we had her on is she was just out there sharing all the knowledge and resources that she was using to learn. And now she's the go-to for how you break in now, right?
Oh, she's amazing. Yes.
People like James Duffy, 19 years old, already has written a book on breaking into information security, put out tools. He's in his first year of college, right? Like there are these, it blows my mind because I wasn't doing things like that when I was breaking. And Elon's a career switcher. So like people who are doing those things, you are so right. That stuff motivates me like crazy. And you don't have to be breaking new ground. You don't have to be writing a book or putting out a blog. But when you are doing things and you're landing that first job and you're putting things out there, I just am so blown away so many times by people who are starting out their career. And it's even more inspiring because I'm like, damn, I need to catch up to them. And they're a year in, right? And it's just amazing. And it's so inspiring and so motivating. I mean, I get motivated by the people who have been in the field forever, who are, as you mentioned, dropping 0 days, coming out with tools and all of that. But those folks who are new and are just killing it, and the excitement, you're right, the excitement around that first real role breaking in is just incredible. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing our industry as we move forward?
Boy, there's so many.
Mm.
And not that that's necessarily all bad, but
keeps us employed.
Yeah, right. I was going to say it. First and foremost, I mean, that's great. The fact that we'll never solve security. No, it's a toss-up for me. I think, again, kind of in nebulous terms, and I'll try to make it more concrete, just the lack of overall empathy in our community is a huge thing, and it comes up a number of times in social media. I bring it up a lot in talks because it speaks to a lot of the problems that we've just talked about here. It's why we have so many toxic behaviors and so many toxic individuals in this space who, treat people poorly and drive them away. It's why we have security leaders who don't understand how to speak to the other leaders in their organization that they have to interact with. It's why we have people in security execution roles who can't figure out how to influence developers and engineering teams to do the security things that we need them to do. Because we don't do a really good job in many cases trying to understand other people's world. We still think like we did 20 years ago that we can just dictate with policies and standards and security controls. We're going to force them to do the things we want to do. And every time we do that, what do? They find a way around it.
Well, a lot of times creating rules encourages breaking them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the tighter, it's, what is the phrase? It's from a movie, it's from Star Wars. Hello. Princess Leia talks about, the tighter he clenches his fist, the more that are going to slip through his fingers. It's exactly that way with security. the tighter we try to control people and just force it on them, the more that slip through and find ways to do things that are outside of what we want. And so being able to understand their motivations, being able to understand their expectations of us. Yes, they have expectations of us too. Surprise, surprise. How do we leverage that and make that collaborative? It takes empathy. And unfortunately, that's something that a lot of us in security, we're still learning how to do.
Well, and that's an important skill. And I think that's an interesting place. Again, getting back to that that perspective of people who are career switchers, like how amazing is it when somebody who comes from teaching or nursing or a field where empathy is implicit and a required daily job stake, or customer service, and comes into information security, and how those skills that we don't think about, how they help us grow and develop and become better, is really amazing. I love that. I never even would have articulated empathy being our biggest challenge, but absolutely makes sense that it's something that could really bring us to the next dimension, especially in terms of understanding user bases and encouraging users to behave in the way we want them to help secure organizations. That's influence requires empathy.
Designing security controls. Think about it.
Sure.
If you understand your users and you understand their mentality and how they function and how they react to things, it's so much easier, I guess I'll use that term, to create security controls that are effective for them, that they can actually work within. And I mean, honestly, that's why password managers aren't widely accepted yet. It's why Google did the right thing and they built it in right into the browser now, right? And obviously all the others have followed suit too. Like, because that's what made it easy enough for people to leverage it. Like, oh, I typed my password once and my browser is going to remember it and enter it for me from now on.
And now even better, suggesting strong passwords every time you go to initially create one.
Yep.
One of the best ways to encourage good user behavior, and that's important. I think everybody needs a friend who's a UX designer or UI designer who works in this field, because they are taught in what they study as professional UX designers to really have that user empathy as part of their DNA, and it's critical.
Well, and honestly, I mean, part of the issue there was we got over ourselves, or somebody forced us to, from the security perspective, in terms of that user threat model, right?
Absolutely.
From security, we always hated the idea, because if someone gets physical access to your computer, then all your passwords are there and they'll break into your stuff. Well, yeah, but for how many people is that really a significant threat in their personal threat model? It's the same thing. I don't know how many times I've seen people post pictures of there's companies that sell these password notebooks where you can literally, it's a notebook for writing all your usernames and passwords in. And people freak out about that. Like, oh, great. It's just as bad as, putting the password underneath your keyboard or whatever. Well, you know what? If that encourages people to use strong and different passwords from place to place, that's a bigger threat, them being hit by credential stuffing by some unknown, person online, than there's a threat of somebody breaking into their house, stealing that, and then using that, right? Like, I mean, that's such a low level risk compared to if we can just get them to use different passwords for every site.
Right, instead of every single time that there's a vulnerability and you can go and pull them, and because one site's been pwned and now everything's been pwned. 100%.
Exactly. I mean, this spraying of credentials. I mean, come on, hello.
Credential spraying, for sure,
and so that's the thing. It's like, and that's the sign of empathy, where somebody understood the user experience and said, you know what, that threat of physical takeover of the machine is so low compared to the threat of them using the same password on 150 different sites. So let's fix that issue instead. And, in the rare case where someone leaves an unlocked laptop, in a coffee shop or something, okay, yeah, they're kind of in a world of hurt.
Right.
Maybe. But how many of the people, here's the other part, how many of the people stealing that laptop that was left there, that's their first option, is they're going to go in there and try to get into people's. No, if they're stealing the laptop, it's probably because they're going to take it and sell it.
They're going to fence it. Yeah. I also would mention people don't give enough credit to the fact that those notebooks may be valuable when somebody becomes deceased, in terms of being able to get access to documents or things that people needed or wanted. And I think that's something that people overlook. I think that's important. Even if you use a password manager, maybe that should be in your safe or in your will, how to get access to that. And
literally just went through this. I had surgery a month and a half ago. And yeah, I mean, I gave that to my sister, kind of the worst case scenario. Here's how you log into my laptop. Here's where you'll find all of my credentials. Here's how you access it. You need my UB key, which is here. You know, I'm the whole 9 yards, right?
I've done similar for surgery before. Yeah.
So.
And that has, and if you're somebody who doesn't use a password manager, and password managers are not, I have that cab conversation every time you speak to a cab driver and they figure out you're going to an InfoSec conference and you're like, hey, if I'm going to leave you with one thing, it's going to be 2FA and use a password manager, or MFA and use a password manager. And then you realize when you're explaining password managers that to them is just an arduous step a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And are they really going to go ahead with that, right? And you can be like, unique passwords aren't going to work without a password manager. And you're trying to encourage, and you're giving them names, and you walk away and you're like, are they actually going to implement that? You don't know, right? Because it's the person you never see again. And the problem is that for some people, it's just a complexity that is easy for us as technophiles, but not necessarily easy for everyone who maybe that isn't where they spend their days. Yeah. So it's really
we can play that empathy game there too if you want.
Why 100%.
How do you get them over the fact that it's so arduous?
By putting it in the browser.
Cool features of what it does. You never have to remember your password. It's going to fill it in for you. If you set up a password on your computer on a website and you have the same password manager installed on your phone, now you can access that same website with your phone, and you don't have to type all the characters with your phone because it's just going to paste it for you. So, and that's that empathy thing again. Understand what their concerns are and how do I motivate them to want to overcome that initial arduous step of installing the software and setting it up. Well, hey, it's going to give you all this really cool stuff that's actually going to make your life 100 times easier. Absolutely. Oh, that's really cool. I'll do it.
Absolutely. Totally. Because telling them long, complex passwords is not going to be feasible, right?
No one's going to do it.
I love it.
No one's going to do it.
So what are you doing when you're not uplifting others or saving the world?
Saving the world. Wow.
Well, saving the world one bit at a time, right? Like that's what we're all doing. We're stopping bad.
I hope so. What do I do? Oh God, lots of things. I'm just finally getting back to fitness again. I like to go hiking, biking. I bought a bike trainer over COVID, so that I could ride my bike because I live in Wisconsin where it's cold and horrible. And, that way I could bike indoors during the winter, with my friend Zwift. Let's see. I mean, you see the guitars behind me.
Yes.
Cameras behind me. I hobbyist photographer. I used to play in a band as far as the guitars, so I still like to play my guitars.
What kind of music?
Oh gosh, all over the map. Very eclectic.
Oh, awesome.
Country, rock, blues.
Nice.
The only thing I don't do is jazz. Really, I mean, that's about it. I'm also a soccer referee.
Oh,
so I referee. That kind of goes with the whole fitness thing, but yeah. So I referee soccer, anything from the little kids clear up through college level. So I referee in like the Big Ten.
Wow.
And other Division II and Division III as well. Even some semi-pro. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the map. I do a lot of stuff.
We need it, right? We need to have those ways to escape and to do other things. And it's important to remember that there are things outside of information security, outside of the analysis and the reporting. And I'm so glad that you shared that with us today. Yeah. So before we wrap up, I'd love to know what your advice is to folks who are looking to break in.
So...
Not break into companies, break into the field. Clarity.
I did a talk on this at DEF CON last year. I'm doing another one at RSA. Sorry, shameless plugs. No, but seriously.
RSA is coming up later this month.
Yeah, it is. End of the month. if you're trying to break into this industry, the biggest thing I can say is make yourself noticeable. Don't put the weight into your degrees, into your certifications, even mentoring. So I did a lot of research last year, and what I ended up uncovering is that those things that I just named don't really impact how quickly you're going to find a job. They don't. I hate to say it. Certifications help in one way. They get you past that requirement that's on so many job descriptions. So what I tell people, if you're trying to get in here, do something that makes you stand out. And by that, I mean, if you're doing self-study, because we always, how many people tell them, oh, well, here's my two biggest pet peeves. You should do your own research. You should build a lab and blah, 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 blah. Okay, how do I put that on a resume? Or the other one I hear all the time, and indeed I got this in the survey that I did last year. I can't tell you how many hiring managers, when I ask them, what do they want to see? Well, I want to see passion. Huh? What does that even mean? How are they supposed to show you passion in a resume or a job interview? Maybe a job interview, but will they even get there? How do they show you passion before you get there? So what I tell people is be active. Go out there in, social media, create blogs, create videos of anything that you're doing. You don't have to be teaching something new. If 5 people view your YouTube channel, good for you. You know what? That's great. You don't need big viewership. Just the fact that you're creating that content, that's something you can put on a resume. You can put those URLs on your resume and say, hey,
and it shows passion.
Go check out my portfolio here. Here's the work I'm doing.
It shows passion, Alyssa. It shows passion. That's how you demonstrate it on the resume.
It solves both those issues. It gets all of that non-traditional skills development and experience on your resume now because it wasn't part of a former job. It also shows your passion. And the other part of it is I say getting out there in social media. Part of that is interacting with those big names in security that, people talk about all the time. It's the wonderful thing about Twitter. You can talk to anybody. Absolutely. Get involved in their threads. You see them tweet something, and if you have any kind of response to it, respond.
I actually wrote a blog post, I think in February, about the importance of Twitter and how to use Twitter for DFIR specifically. But it was, and the importance of it because, and I actually, it's so funny because I said, please, please, please promote this blog on LinkedIn. Not on Twitter. The people on Twitter don't need to see this. They understand it. But the value of lists and getting connected with people, and Twitter is not all about what a celebrity ate for breakfast. I only use it for the field. And it's important to know how to do that and how it can be valuable. And 100%, what was D for Diva's first blog post? It was how she set up her home lab. And that is exactly, and I reference people to that in classes I teach at graduate school now, because that blog post is so critical and needed. So even though something might seem rudimentary to you, it may be something the community needs. Everything you learn, you're learning something else that somebody else is going to look for. So 100% share it. And that, like you said, demonstrates the things that you're saying that those leaders want to see passion. And to see experience, you're demonstrating that experience, but you have to put it in writing. But at the end of the day, the work you do in information security, you have to put in writing too. It doesn't matter how good your hack is if you can't put it in writing. So yeah, might as well get a start now too. And as a hiring manager, it shows your hiring manager that you also know how to write, right?
You know how to write, you know how to communicate. Exactly. You have a dynamic personality. If you're recording videos,
Yes, absolutely.
Let it show.
Let it show. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing all of your wisdom and advice and your stories. It's been an absolute pleasure having you as a guest today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Feel free to check out magnetforensics.com/cache up for links to the RSS feed, playlist, see what upcoming episodes there are. We'll see you next time. Bye.